So for the second part of the case study, what we have is that the company now has an inventory and they will use inventory and they want to know if it's possible to meet the demand. So here is the GAMS. The GAMS is basically the same as the one before. We have the same sets, we have the same parameters and tables. We will only have a new variable, which is the variable n that represents the inventory for each part at certain weeks. And for the constraints, now we only have one new constraint that is for the inventory of week 1, when the inventory must be equal to 0 because it's when we are just starting. So we modified the objective function, and we now also want to minimize the amount of inventory that we have. Then on the next one, we have the constraint of the production, and now we will also add to the units produced and the slacks, we will also add the inventory, and this will be equal to the demand for that part at that week, plus the inventory for that part on the next week. And then is the constraint that I was talking about, that the inventory at week 1 must be equal to 0. And then after that, the constraints are basically the same. None of them changes. Maybe the only change is on the last one, where we also take into account the inventory for the total units produced. So we have here the results, and we can see that we have no slacks. So for that, we can say that we are meeting all the demand. There is our overtime. None of those values exceed the 48-hour limit. Then is the schedule for each of the weeks. Then we have the inventory. We know that we have inventory at week 11 for part 1 and part 2. And then after that, we have the total units produced for each of the parts. Now, we can compare the projected demand against what we produce, and we can see that we are okay in all the numbers. We have also only in line number 10 that we are producing a little bit more than what we need for the demand of that week, and that is because we are producing the inventory that we're going to use at week 11. Why are we using that inventory on week 11? Well, because in the last part of this exercise, we saw that on that week we were not able to meet the demand. So now what the program is doing is creating an inventory to be able to meet that demand. So we can see, for example, right here, that the slack on that problem is exactly the same as the inventory on this problem. So in conclusion, we are able to meet the demand on this problem with this new policy of having inventory for the company.